The straw beneath you is wet, not from rain. You have been lying on it for perhaps 3 hours, and it is wet from the 12 bodies sharing it with you, each one exhaling heat and moisture into the space between the floor and the ceiling, which is low enough that a tall man cannot fully stand. The smell is... you have no word for it. You have smelled privies. You have smelled the river in August. This is neither of those things. This is something older. Something that has been building in this room for months without anyone opening a window. Because there is no window. Because a window costs more, and the room you are in costs 1 penny. 1 penny. That is what it cost to sleep here tonight. You are in Southwark. The year is 1350. The inn has no name, you were told. The man at the door simply held out his hand, and when you put the coin in it, he stood aside. He bolted the door from the outside after the last body came in. He does not open it until dawn. That is the arrangement. You knew this when you paid. What you did not know, what no one told you, is what 1 penny actually buys in the year 1350. And you are about to find out, because the man pressed against your left shoulder has just stopped being warm in the way that sleeping men are warm. You knew this when you put down your coin. What you did not know, what no one tells you, because everyone in this city already understands it the way they understand the tide, is what a penny actually buys in London in the year 1350. Not shelter, not safety, not rest. A penny buys you a place on the floor and proximity to whatever 12 strangers brought in from the road. And in 1350, what people carry in from the road is not only mud. The man pressed against your left shoulder has been still for a while now. Still in a way that sleeping men are not quite still. And you have approximately 2 hours before dawn. You arrived before dark, which means you have already seen the room in what passes for light here. It is approximately 14 feet by 12. The floor is beaten earth. The straw on it has not been changed since. You asked, and the answer you received was a look. Historian Barbara Hannawalt, in her 1986 study, The Ties That Bound, documented the sleeping arrangements of London's labouring poor in the medieval period, and found that communal floor lodging in low-end establishments near the Thames was the dominant form of shelter for transient workers and travellers who could not afford even a shared bed. Not a private room, not a bed, a share of a floor. The straw contains things. You can feel them. You've been trying not to think about what they are. Fleas are the obvious answer, and yes, within 20 minutes of lying down, you have been bitten multiple times. But the straw also contains lice, and lice move in a way that fleas do not. Fleas jump. Lice walk. You can feel the walking. Medieval physician John of Gaddesden, writing in his Rosa Medicinae around 1314, recommended preparations involving sulfur compounds as part of treatments against skin parasites. You have nothing like that. You have a travelling cloak that is now doing whatever the straw tells it to do. There are 12 other people in this room. You counted them when the light was still good enough to count. 3 appear to be labourers, hands like wood, the particular way they lowered themselves onto the floor that suggested this is not their first night here. 1 is a woman travelling alone, who has positioned herself against the far wall with her back to the room. And you do not look at her because looking at her is the kind of thing that starts the kind of trouble that ends with the innkeeper opening the door early and removing someone feet first. 2 of the 12 are coughing. Not sometimes, continuously. And this is 1350. You understand what that means. The plague reached London in late 1348, and its mortality continued through 1349 and into the early 1350s. Historian Ole Benedicto, in his 2004 The Black Death, 1346 to 1353, estimated that between 40 and 60% of England's population died within 2 years of first exposure. You know people who have died. You know what the early coughing sounds like. You are lying in a 14 by 12 room in the dark, and 2 people near you are making that sound. But stay with me, because we have not yet talked about what is in the straw that you cannot feel. You know what the cough means. Everyone in this room knows what the cough means. You all lay down anyway, because the alternative to lying down in a room with the cough is lying down in the street without a roof. And the rain tonight is the kind of rain that has intentions. And we have not yet spoken about what the cough meant for the air you have been breathing for the past 3 hours. Stay with me. You do not know these people. This is the thing that is easy to forget when you read about communal lodging in the historical record. The intimacy of it. You are pressed shoulder to hip to knee against 11 strangers. Their breath is in your face. The man to your right has his hand somewhere near your coat, which contains the coins you have left. And you have been aware of his hand for the past 2 hours, with the specific, focused awareness of a man who cannot afford to lose what is in that coat. Medieval London had no police force. What it had was the Watch, a rotating system of men appointed by each ward to patrol the streets at night, documented in detail by historian Henry Thomas Riley in his translations of the Liber Albus, the city's administrative record compiled in 1419. The Watch's authority and reliability varied by ward and by night. Inside a bolted room, it meant nothing at all. The man to your right shifts. His hand moves. You move your coat. On your left, the man who has been still for a while now. You noticed him when you arrived. He paid his penny separately. Came in just before the bolt went across. He sat against the wall and did not speak, and did not eat, and did not arrange his cloak in the manner of a man settling in for sleep. He simply settled, like something that had been set down. He smelled of the road. They all smell of the road. But his smell had something else in it. Something you identified and then did not finish identifying, because finishing that thought in a room you cannot leave is not something you want to do. He has been pressed against your left shoulder for approximately 3 hours. He is still warm. But here is the thing about warmth. The 2 men who were coughing have stopped. Not gradually, the way a cough subsides when someone finally drops into deep sleep, but in the abrupt way that a sound stops when the thing making it stops. One stopped. Then, 20 minutes later, the other. And the silence where the coughing was is not a restful silence. You noticed this. So did the man to your right. His hand stilled for approximately 10 minutes after the second cough stopped. Then it began moving again. And the man to your left has been warm against your shoulder in a way that is no longer quite ordinary. But here's what you need to understand before we get to that. Stay with me. You have heard that the plague is cold, that when a person dies of it, they go cold fast. You have heard men say this at the roadside, at the city gates, in the queue for bread near Bishopsgate. Cold fast. That is what they said. So for a moment, for perhaps 20 minutes, you told yourself that the warmth against your left shoulder meant he was alive. That was the thing you told yourself. Here is what the record actually shows. Physician and chronicler Guy de Chauliac survived the Black Death in Avignon and documented its progression in his Chirurgia Magna, completed around 1363. He described the pneumonic form, the lung infection, as producing intense fever throughout its course, the body remaining hot until very near the end. In a warm room packed with living bodies, a recently dead man does not cool quickly. Heat leaves a body slowly when the air around it is already warm. The cooling takes hours. The man against your left shoulder is warm in that way. Not the way a sleeping man is warm. The way a fire is warm when it has just run out of wood and the coals are still radiating everything they have left. You realize this approximately 2 hours before dawn. You cannot sit up without waking the man to your right, whose hand is still too close to your coat. You cannot stand without stepping on the 3 bodies between you and the far wall. The woman with her back to the room has stopped shifting. The coughing to your right has gone quiet. The door is bolted from the outside, and we have not yet talked about what you are going to do next, or rather, what you cannot do. Stay with me. The man against your left shoulder is warm in that way. Not the warmth of sleep, which is even and moves as the body moves. The warmth of a furnace in the hour after the fuel runs out, radiating everything it accumulated, going outward, not inward. You understand this somewhere in the 2nd hour after midnight. Not all at once. Understanding like this arrives in pieces, each piece slightly worse than the last, assembling itself against your will from details you have been noticing and refusing to finish noticing. The stillness, the quality of the warmth. The last time you felt him breathe against your shoulder, you try to calculate when, and the calculation will not finish, because finishing it means knowing exactly how long you have been lying pressed against a dead man in a bolted room, breathing sealed air, with at least 2 other people in this room who were coughing an hour ago and are now silent. You cannot move away from him without waking the man to your right. The man to your right, whose hand is near your coat, and the door is bolted from the outside. You could shout, theoretically. The innkeeper and establishments of this kind clustered around Southwark, Queenhithe and Billingsgate are documented in ward records translated by Riley, typically slept in an adjoining structure, separated from the lodging floor by a wall and his own indifference. Guests who shouted in the night were problems. Problems meant the door opening before dawn. The door opening before dawn meant lost pennies when the remaining guests scattered rather than paid for a second night. They did not open the door. The Liber Albus contains civic ordinances regulating the legal responsibility of innkeepers for the welfare and deaths of guests within their establishments, regulations that exist precisely because such deaths were not rare. The framework placed responsibility on the guest to arrive in apparent good health, and on the innkeeper to have had no prior knowledge of illness. Beyond that, liability was limited. The guest was admitted in good health. The innkeeper had no reason to suspect otherwise. You have perhaps 2 hours. The man against your left shoulder has stopped generating that coals running out warmth. He has begun, very slowly, to cool. The room itself holds the heat of many bodies, and heat does not leave easily. But the specific warmth that was his, that is going. When the door opens, you will be the living body next to the cooling one. You will have been pressed against him for hours. You have no way to prove when you noticed. You have no way to prove that the coins in your coat are yours and not his. You have one strategy. Be standing when the door opens. Be standing near the door, not near him. Be the person who says, "I think something has happened," and not the person about whom something is being decided. The room is quiet now. You watch the place where the door is, in the dark, and you count your remaining coins by touch, and you wait for the light. You are going to be standing when that door opens. Near the door. Away from him. You are going to say, "I think something has happened to the man by the wall," in the voice of someone who has only just noticed, and not in the voice of someone who has been lying next to it in the dark for 90 minutes, calculating. You are going to hold your coat closed and look directly at the innkeeper, and be the person who reports the problem, and not the person about whom a problem is being decided. This is the plan. You have 90 minutes to practice it, in the dark, next to the warmth that is no longer warm. 1 penny. That is where we began. 1 coin, pressed into a stranger's hand and the door bolted behind you. By morning, the coin is spent, the man is still, and you are standing near the door, practicing a true story in the language of someone who survived. History does not record the name of the man against the wall. It does not record who was sleeping to his left, or what they did with the 2 hours before dawn. The inn had no name worth keeping. The innkeeper had no reason to remember the night, because nights like this one were not exceptional. That is what should stay with you. Not the plague, not the straw, not the bolted door. The fact that this was ordinary. That across London, in 100 rooms like this one, on 100 floors like this one, people paid their penny and made their calculations and practiced their true stories and waited for the light. And this was simply Tuesday. The past does not ask to be survived. It simply continues, room by room, breath by breath, until the door opens and the ones still standing walk out into the morning and become, briefly, the kind of people history does not bother to name. These are the stories buried in the past.